Continuing endocrine pancreas, we on the first class discussed the regulation of glucose in general, and we saw that insulin and glucagon, they are the major pancreatic hormones and they have major role in regulation of blood glucose level. In the second class, we mainly focused on insulin, and now we will study glucagon, and then briefly somatostatin, and finally diabetes mellitus. And many of the features and associated signs or symptoms and their physiological basis we have already discussed. We will briefly touch it, and the details you study in pathology and we have covered in PBL also. Now you will attempt this question. All of the following are responsible for preventing severe fall in blood glucose level during fasting, except is the message box public here? Can you see the message sent by other friends?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's okay, no problem. Okay, write your own answer, not simply because someone else has written someone, you will write your own answer. Okay, everyone will write the answer. There are only 4 answers. We are 52 here. But only 52. Today attendance is less than the previous one. Any problem? Okay, Dikshant will tell us, why did you choose D? Okay, will you explain why you go for D?
Glycogenolysis is not possible in muscle. They do not have enzyme.
A, B, C, they are true. You are sure about it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you are correct. Okay, anyone would like to add? Does glycogenolysis occur in muscles or not? Do muscles, they store glycogen?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Sir, blood को लागि
do they store or not glycogen? Okay, anyone else? I think Racha was speaking.
Sir, it muscle को glycogen चाहिँ it आफूलाई मात्रै हुन्छ, does not contribute to the blood glucose.
Okay, good. You are all correct. Regarding the explanation, glycogen storage occurs in muscles also, but when necessary, the glycogenolysis also occurs, but glucose is not released back in blood in case of muscles, but in case of liver, that does occur. Therefore, muscles are selfish in this regard. Now we have already seen this figure, and today we will mainly study the alpha cells secrete glucagon and delta cells somatostatin. And there are other types of cells, F cells. They secrete polypeptide, pancreatic polypeptide, called that is also one hormone, and its physiological significance is not very clear. Therefore, you can just remember its name and also the cells that secrete. We will not go into. Okay, now glucagon. It is again a peptide hormone like insulin, and it is secreted by alpha cells, we have already mentioned, and it has profound hyperglycemic effect. And now you know very well that this effect is opposite to that of insulin. Therefore, in glucose regulation, they have opposite effect. Now, can you guess from this chemical nature of this hormone, polypeptide hormone, where will be the receptors located? On the cell membrane surface or cytoplasm or the nucleus? Peptide hormones, where are their receptors located? Is Nissan Lamisani here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Nissan, can you tell us where will be the receptors, on the cell surface or inside the cell?
Cell surface, sir.
Cell surface, okay, good. Now, let's guess about its onset of action, regarding onset of action and plasma half-life. Will it be short one or long one if we compare all hormones? Let's compare with thyroid hormones. Onset of action, will it be shorter or it will take more time, longer time? In other words, if we inject glucagon and if we also inject inject thyroid hormone, which one will show effects more immediately? Devlina?
Sir, glucagon.
Glucagon. Why?
Sir, it is a long onset of action.
It has?
When it show its effect, not immediately.
Glucagon will show
Sorry,
immediately?
it show its effect immediately, but thyroid action is a long time.
Okay. On what basis can you say like this?
30 half plasma half-life.
Okay. Does the chemical nature give any hint about that?
Yes, sir. Thyroid lipid soluble. See, it is nuclear receptor and it is cell surface receptor.
Okay, surface receptors. It is peptide hormone surface receptors. Water soluble. Peptide hormones are water soluble.
Yes, sir.
Okay, they have surface receptors and their mechanisms are in general, they are faster to act. And for intracellular receptors, their major mechanism is to first to carry out gene transcription and protein synthesis that takes time. Even for the polypeptide hormones, the effects that are mediated through gene transcription, they take time. For example, growth promoting effect of insulin, that takes time, but just glucose lowering effect is immediate. Okay, good. You are right, Devina. Thanks. Okay, let's see this slide. The receptors for this one are cell surface receptors and G protein coupled type. And then time of onset of action is within minutes, some minutes, and maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes. And metabolism mainly occurs in the liver. Plasma half-life is short. And in general, the peptide hormones, water-soluble hormones, they have short plasma half-life because they are not easily excreted, for example, by kidney, finally. And the site of metabolism also determines it. And plasma binding also. When there is plasma binding, the plasma half-life is longer because they are not easily excreted. Just remember, insulin and glucagon, they both are peptide hormones and they have short plasma half-life and immediate actions also. And their actions will be terminated or will end soon because they will be rapidly eliminated. Okay, let's see the effects. Do you remember the receptor type in case of insulin hormones? Insulin hormone? Enzyme-linked receptors, again, cell surface. Here, G protein coupled receptor. For enzyme-linked receptors, remember one example, good example, insulin. Okay. Now, effects of glucagon on glucose metabolism. And the effects will be opposite to that of insulin. Glycogenolysis in the liver. In case of insulin, that was inhibition of glycogenolysis. And here it acts through cyclic AMP second messenger system, and it is one of the best studied example of this second messenger. And there are multiple stages here, and one enzyme activates another one, and finally there is highly amplified reaction, and you know its significance because even a small amount of the hormone, low concentration, can finally mediate large, highly amplified final results. A large number of molecules finally they are produced. And another effect is gluconeogenesis, synthesis of glucose from non-carbohydrate, mostly amino acids, some amino acids. And this effect is again opposite to that of insulin. On lipid metabolism, this effect is seen at relatively higher concentration. Therefore, most important ones at physiological concentrations are on glucose, on carbohydrate metabolism. At higher concentrations, it mobilizes lipid stores, again opposite to that of insulin. And to talk about regulation of glucagon secretion. Now, you know its role. Its role is to prevent fall in blood glucose level during fasting or exercise. And for that purpose, it should be secreted in response to low blood glucose. As we have seen in our previous slide, glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis, their final effect is to increase blood glucose level. And if it is stimulated by low blood glucose level, that would be physiologically beneficial, and it does also. Low blood glucose level and mainly to hypoglycemic levels. We will see the chart now, the figure. Then increase in blood amino acid levels. See here, this point is same as that for insulin. Insulin secretion increases in response to some amino acid levels, and this glucagon hormone, its secretion also increases in response to some blood amino acid levels, mainly arginine, alanine, these amino acids, and these are gluconeogenic amino acids, and glucose can be formed from those amino acids. And its importance may be that suppose we take some meal that is rich in those amino acids. Now what happens? In the blood, their concentration will increase. Then insulin secretion will increase, and that will tend to decrease blood glucose level. To prevent that one, if those amino acids also initiate glucagon secretion, it will prevent unnecessary fall in or severe fall in blood glucose level. It has been interpreted like this. And exercise, another stimulating factor is exercise, and we can understand its importance. During exercise, there is chance of low blood glucose level due to increased consumption, but glucagon secretion increases even before glucose level actually falls. And its importance is it prevents, it is already ready, it anticipates, this mechanism anticipates blood glucose level can decrease during exercise. Therefore, with exercise, glucagon level increases, and then glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, it will occur, and it will prevent fall in glucose level during exercise. And it is just like increase in respiratory rate, ventilation during exercise, a kind of anticipation. And there are other factors also. I have included only the most important ones. And inhibitory factors, they include increase in blood glucose level, just opposite to the low blood glucose level that stimulates. And then another hormone, somatostatin, that is also secreted from the pancreatic islets. And these cells are close together to each other, and here its role of somatostatin is may be considered as a paracrine mechanism. And insulin also, that will also inhibit secretion of glucagon. But if you remember the role of glucagon in secretion of insulin, do you remember what is the effect of glucagon secretion on insulin secretion, glucagon level on insulin secretion? If there is increase in glucagon level, what will be the effect on insulin secretion? That will stimulate. Increase in glucagon level stimulates insulin secretion, but insulin inhibits glucagon secretion. Okay, now let's see this figure, and it shows in the horizontal axis blood glucose level, and on the vertical axis glucagon level. And here, normally the blood glucose level will be around 90, say here. At this point, plasma glucagon level is 1. 1 means normal. Here 1 is considered as normal. It is not the exact value, just arbitrary unit, and a normal one we are taking it as 1. Now, if blood glucose level decreases, say even up to 70, it is only slightly increased. But after that, see here, after 70, it increases more rapidly. Therefore, glucagon, its secretion is mainly important to prevent hypoglycemia. And here, when blood glucose increases, its secretion decreases, but it is not much difference. And in this end, the regulatory mechanism is mainly through insulin. And glucagon is highly potent to have hyperglycemic effect. And even some micrograms of glucagon can cause large increase in glucose level. Highly potent. Now, one question for you. Glucagon stimulates all except? Okay, you are correct. And you know, if you are confused for time framing, just avoid it. Ketogenesis, if you are not sure, just leave it for now. Gluconeogenesis. Glucagon stimulates gluconeogenesis. You know it very well. Lipid synthesis. Glucagon stimulates, we just mentioned, lipolysis, mobilization of lipids, utilization of lipids. Insulin promotes stores. Glucagon promotes lipid mobilization, means lipolysis. And there will be release of lipids from the stores like adipose tissues. And therefore, it is not matching here. Glucagon stimulates all except. Let's go for other cells. Just one minute. Okay, there was some disturbance. Okay, therefore the answer here, one possible answer is lipid synthesis. Let's check insulin secretion. Glucagon stimulates insulin secretion. We just mentioned it. Okay, and what about ketogenesis? Lipolysis. It is likely to be accompanied by ketogenesis. And if you compare with insulin deficiency causes ketogenesis. And glucagon, it has opposite effect, just like insulin deficiency. Okay, therefore the answer here is, one of this answer is correct, and it is lipid synthesis. Is it okay? All of the following stimulate glucagon secretion except? Stimulate glucagon secretion except. Let's check one by one. Let me see your answers. C, D, insulin, C, and insulin are same. D is exercise. Decrease in blood glucose, that stimulates glucagon secretion. Increase in blood amino acids, some amino acids, they increase glucagon secretion just like insulin. And C is insulin. If you are not sure, see next, exercise. We have seen during exercise, there is chance of hypoglycemia if not corrected or prevented by some mechanism. Therefore, glucagon secretion occurs there, and we just mentioned it. And in the question there is except. Okay. Therefore, insulin is not the answer here. Exercise is not the answer here. And we know insulin, it inhibits glucagon secretion. But glucagon stimulates insulin secretion. Is it difficult to remember? For memory, you can understand it like this. When there is increase in glucose level after meal, what happens? Insulin secretion increases, and its purpose is to facilitate glucose uptake to the cells. And there is already high glucose level, and in that case glucagon secretion is not required. Glucagon is required when there is the likelihood of decrease in blood glucose level, and in such case insulin level will increase but glucagon level will decrease. Therefore, insulin inhibits glucagon secretion, not stimulate. We correlated the stimulatory effect of glucagon on increase in amino acid level will stimulate both glucagon and insulin secretion. You may be confused in this is 3. Amino acid secretion, amino acid level stimulates secretion of both glucagon and insulin. Insulin secretion or insulin level, increase in insulin level will inhibit glucagon secretion, but glucagon secretion will stimulate insulin secretion. Now try to remember this. Okay, next, somatostatin. It is secreted by the delta cells, and stimuli for this secretion are all of the stimuli that increase insulin secretion. They also increase somatostatin secretion, like increase in blood glucose level, amino acid level, fatty acid concentration, and some upper GI hormones. They also increase somatostatin secretion. Just like in case of insulin, it was incretins, GLP-1, GIP. They also increase somatostatin secretion. Now its actions. Now first just try to understand the sentences, and then we will try to summarize it. It depresses secretion of insulin and glucagon, both insulin and glucagon. We know insulin and glucagon, they have opposite effects, mainly opposite in glucose level. Here somatostatin is depressing, inhibiting secretion of both of them. And it decreases motility of the stomach, duodenum and gallbladder. And we have studied it under GI system also, somatostatin. It is also secreted from intestinal cells. And here it is being secreted from pancreatic islets. And they are chemically same. They are same thing. And depresses secretion and absorption in the gastrointestinal tract. And we studied this one also in GI system. Now, what is the importance of this all? And it has been interpreted like it extends the period over which nutrients are assimilated and utilized, making them available over a longer period of time. It means if there is no somatostatin, there would be increase in motility of the gastrointestinal tract, like stomach, duodenum. Then there would be increase in secretion and absorption. After meal, we take meals at certain intervals. We do not take meals continuously. It means when meals are taken, then if they are processed rapidly, immediately, there is chance of sudden increase in these nutrients in the blood. And after some time, when between the meals, there is chance of decrease in nutrients in the meals. Now, the action of somatostatin appears to be to lengthen the processing, and therefore to decrease the fluctuations in the blood levels. It has been interpreted like this. And the effects on insulin and glucagon, they are not as prominent as those caused by glucose. Therefore, the primary stimulation, the primary factors is not somatostatin, but still to some extent it regulates, it minimizes their secretions or their rapid actions. And pancreatic polypeptide is also believed to act in the similar way, but details are not available. Okay, now do you have any questions till now? Okay, now diabetes mellitus. You have already studied this one. And diabetes mellitus is not a single disease, and actually it is a group of metabolic disorders, and all of them, they share one common feature of hyperglycemia. In the absence of treatment means when there is no treatment, there will be hyperglycemia, but with treatment it may be controlled. Even in that case, we still call it diabetes mellitus. And this I've taken from WHO 2019 one publication. And the etiology, it is also widely varied. And whatever may be the cause, finally there is some pattern, like defects in insulin secretion may be the cause, or its action, that is sensitivity. There may be resistance, or sometimes there may be both. And in most of the cases, it is a degree of combination. And disturbances, and resulting from this one, there is disturbances carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism. Generally, when we say diabetes mellitus, we think of glucose only, but it is not only the carbohydrate. Fat and protein metabolism is also impaired because insulin, glucagon, they have effect on this metabolism cells. Now, physiology behind diagnosis, we have already seen this figure, the lower one. In the horizontal axis, there is in the horizontal axis there is time in hours. In the vertical axis there is glucose level in mg per deciliter. Remember, it is milligrams, not grams. Milligrams per deciliter. Deciliter is 100 ml. Now, after 0 is at the time of meal, and after meal there is increase in blood glucose level, and at the baseline it is around 90 mg per deciliter, and after meal it may raise up to 120 or maybe up to 30. It varies according to people also, but it is generally not above 140, and then it falls again due to increased insulin secretion, and within about 1 hour it begins to fall, and by 2 hours it is again almost normal, and then it is prevented to fall much below that one. There will not be hypoglycemia either between meals. Again, after next meal, the same pattern will continue. But what happens in diabetes? The fasting glucose level will be high. The degree of hyperglycemia may depend on the severity. Here it is 100, around 140. Now, after meal, it rises and it crosses even to 200 is given here. And the main during diagnosis, we say after 2 hours, normally it will be just around the normal one fasting level. But in case of diabetes, you see here, it is still high. It is the response that should have been back to normal is not here. Okay, then it continues for some hours again, and even before the next meal, it still remains above the normal level. This is the normal response that we expect, but in diabetes, this response is not there, and we call it abnormal. This is the basis of 2-hour postprandial or after standard glucose tolerance test. Now, in diabetes mellitus, there is inability of the most cells of the body to uptake glucose, and increase in blood glucose concentration that is used for diagnosis also, and increased utilization of fats and proteins for energy because cells are not able to utilize glucose. Regarding the pathophysiology, the major types are type 1 and type 2, you know it, and there are other types also now, and many secondary causes are also available, are also classified, and this type 1 and type 2, and it is based on the etiology also, the cause also. In type 1, there will be destruction mainly due to autoimmune mechanisms that are predisposed by hereditary factors. There will be destruction of beta cells by some infection or autoimmune disorders. And finally, the result is low insulin levels. You know it. In type 2 diabetes, initially, the insulin levels are there is no problem with insulin level, but there is problem with their action, sensitivity of the cells to insulin. Means the actions that insulin would mediate, they will not be absorbed. We call it insulin resistance. And for that, for compensation, the insulin secretion will increase because there is no response to insulin. Means blood glucose level will not decrease in response to insulin. Therefore, insulin secretion will increase in the initial phase. But later on, that usually occurs is, in many cases, later on with time, some years maybe, or even decades, what happens? The beta cells that would previously be increasing insulin secretion, they are now exhausted, and there will be decrease in insulin secretion. And later, therefore, there will be decrease in insulin levels. But we still call it type 2 because the initial events is different from the initial events of type 1. And type 2 is more common, much more common, about 90%. And there are other types also. Type 2 and many others are mainly associated with obesity. Obesity is the most common, known, and preventable to some extent modifiable factor. And there are different features. This is comparison of different clinical features in case of type 1 and type 2. And we know the common symptoms of hyperglycemia, they will be observed in diabetes mellitus, the triad. The triad consists of, you know, the triad, polyuria, polydipsia, and polyphagia. And we mentioned the mechanism behind this one also. Do you remember the mechanism behind polyuria? Polyuria. To say in one word, one phrase, osmotic diuresis. Good. Osmotic diuresis. And then polydipsia. Is polydipsia the result of polyuria or the cause of polyuria? Polyuria is one contributing factor for polydipsia. High osmolarity itself also can cause polydipsia, and when there is polyuria, that also contributes to polydipsia. Therefore, when there is polyuria and drinking, the drinking should not be stopped. Drinking adequate water will prevent dehydration. Okay. You will see the table here. You can go through it on your own also. You have studied also. Okay. Now complications, and there are acute and chronic complications. And diabetes mellitus is itself a chronic disorder, and their major concerns, their major issues are the chronic complications. But sometimes during that chronic course, there might be some acute complications also. During this chronic process, there will be superimposed acute complications also. And we have already studied the mechanism behind dehydration, metabolic acidosis, and it is more common in type 1 diabetes mellitus. It is not that it will not occur in type 2, but more common, much more common in type 1. Because presence of insulin will prevent this condition in type 2. Initially, there is insulin, even high levels in initial cases in type 2. Therefore, that will prevent diabetic ketoacidosis. And in non-ketotic hyperosmolar state, that is more common in type 2. And the hyperosmolar, as the name suggests, there is high blood glucose concentration, may rise up to 600, 700, even more than that. But it is non-ketotic because there will not be ketoacidosis. And one mechanism, one way to explain why it is more common in type 2 is in type 1, the initial course is more rapid than type 2. To say in other words, type 2 it may not present with serious symptoms initially. Therefore, its diagnosis is relatively more delayed, and many cases are not even diagnosed. Therefore, there may be very high levels of glucose, and that may present with acute complications with this feature, and then they can come to the hospital in the emergency. These both are emergency conditions. And hypoglycemia, though it seems contradictory here, and it is said that many of the patients, this one is one of the common complications. This may be the complication due to missing of meals, or sometimes the overtreatment also. For example, insulin, someone who is taking insulin, if there is overdose, or the insulin is taken but meal is missed, in that case also hypoglycemia can occur. And regarding the chronic complications, there are different vascular changes. There are microvascular, macrovascular, you study in pathology. Just to mention some, myocardial infarction risk is increased. Stroke means the vascular events in the brain, maybe ischemic or hemorrhagic. Then renal failure one of the most common cause of renal failure is diabetes mellitus. You have studied in renal system. And retinopathy, one of the common cause of blindness is diabetes mellitus. And if properly treated, its incidence can be decreased. And neuropathy, nervous system is also involved, mainly peripheral nervous system, maybe sensory, motor, and autonomic. The autonomic reflexes, they are impaired in diabetes mellitus. For example, the baroreceptor reflex mechanism to control blood pressure is impaired. Therefore, when a person suddenly rises from the lying down position, when it stands erect, there can be decrease in blood pressure, and that can even cause falling and impaired consciousness. And one of such that condition is called postural hypotension, and one cause is diabetes mellitus. Therefore, we examine for such signs in case of patients with diabetes mellitus. And infections, not to forget, mentioned last, but infections, and you now know one of the risk factor for bad prognosis of COVID-19 is also diabetes mellitus. And immune system is also compromised in case of diabetes mellitus. Mainly neutrophils, macrophages, their functioning is impaired. And besides this, there is vascular compromise due to alterations in blood vessels. Blood flow will not be proper. And also sensation is not good. Therefore, the people, they can have injuries to their limbs, like in the foot, hand. And during diabetic care, therefore, you will educate your patients to take care of their hands and feet. Actually, they are advised to examine their hands and feet every day before sleep, because minor injuries that can be detected when they occur by normal people due to normal sensation. There may be impaired sensation, and they cannot realize when the injuries occur. But later, there is increased chance of infection, and therefore delayed, and wound healing is also delayed. And one of the complication is delayed wound healing, and then gangrene, and sometimes the limb may have to be amputated. Therefore, that part of care is also important. Okay, any questions? Now, prevention and management. The pharmacological management you study in pharmacology, and besides this, for the initial levels of glucose, impaired glucose tolerance, or the initial levels of diabetes mellitus when hyperglycemia is not very severe, dietary approach, physical activity, and weight control, weight reduction, they are some of the major lifestyle. We can improve the glucose level by lifestyle modification by these approaches, and these are important, very important. And I think we have studied in more detail in PBL also. And mainly from physiological viewpoint, dietary approach includes what will be the dietary approach for prevention and also management. How common is diabetes mellitus? Do you have any idea? In the populations, how common is it? Okay, low carbohydrate diet. How common is diabetes mellitus? Any idea? It is common. It is one of the commonest non-communicable diseases. I am not sure about the data in Nepal. It is believed that around 10% of the population, the adults, they suffer from diabetes. Okay, Ruksa says 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 10 around estimated, but many remain undiagnosed because in the earlier stage, the symptoms are minor and non-specific. Therefore, people do not even get it checked. Okay, therefore, dietary approach. And dietary approach is not helpful only in diabetes, but also for almost all non-communicable diseases, including diabetes mellitus, hypertension, obesity itself, dietary approach. mainly for this from glucose viewpoint or diabetic viewpoint. Dietary approach means, as Rachya mentioned, low carbohydrate diet. For normal people, they can take balanced diet. Even for diabetic patients nowadays, balanced diet approach is chosen, because when we are very strict, the people, they do not comply with it, and they if they do not comply with it, it is not beneficial. Mainly what they can do is to avoid very carbohydrate foods, have a balanced diet, and then to avoid simple sugars like the juices, the carbonated drinks, and even for teas or coffees, they can have some alternates of this. But total restriction is not necessary, and that is not beneficial, and compliance will be very less. Meals, small meals but more frequent meals can be helpful. Physical activity. How much physical activity is recommended? Any idea? At least minimum one to prevent any cardiovascular or diabetes or anyone. There is one general recommendation for physical activity from WHO also, because with decrease in physical activity, with modernization, the prevalence of these non-communicable diseases, including diabetes mellitus, has increased. Therefore, physical activity is one general approach that is helpful to prevent non-communicable disease, all non-communicable diseases. And we ourselves have to take care about physical activity. At least 30 minutes of moderate level. That means at least jogging or fast walking. 30 minutes every day. At least 5 days per week, every day. Normalization of BMI if there is overweight or obesity. And again, the normalization, it will include dietary restrictions or dietary approach and physical activity. Again, these two are important aspects of that one also. And pharmacological, we have studied pharmacological ones, including oral drugs and insulin also. I will not go into detail of it. Last, final slide. Glucagon like peptide 1 and GIP, gastric inhibitory peptide, are also called another name for GIP. Do you remember it? They are the incretins. Is it correct? Incretins. They are these two hormones called incretins? Is that correct? You can write your answer in the message box. These are incretins. GLP-1 increases blood glucose level. Is that correct or not? Okay. Though in the name there is glucagon-like peptide, but the actions are not like glucagon. In their synthesis, these hormones, they are also synthesized from pro-glucagon. Therefore, the name comes. But by action, the glucagon-like peptide and glucagon, they have opposite effect on glucose level. Therefore, this one is false. Diabetic ketoacidosis is more common in type 1 diabetes mellitus. Is that correct? Okay, true. And non-ketotic hyperosmolar state is more common in type. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Next, we will study adrenal cortical hormones.
Sir,
Yes, please.
sir, hypothalamus secrete somatostatin or growth hormone
Yes.
inhibiting.
Hypothalamus, we
pancreas.
also mentioned in hypothalamus, growth hormone inhibiting hormone.
Sir, both name same and pancreatic and
Their name are same, and they are actually same hormone. Chemically also they are same thing.
Sir, action different both.
Pardon, Devlina?
Sir, action are different both. Hypothalamic
Actions
and
are also similar, but in case of the hypothalamic, the concentration is increased mainly in the anterior pituitary, because there is local portal system. Therefore, the concentrations, the blood concentration, systemic blood concentrations may not rise much in normal physiological secretions. That is the difference. But if the same hormone comes in blood in high concentration, it is the same thing. Even from the intestinal cells also, there is secretion of somatostatin to some extent. That is also same somatostatin.
So if question asks from somatostatin, what will write in hypothalamic or pancreatic delta cell?
You will write there are multiple sources, and you can then write individually, briefly.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.